Hey there. If you are an actor or are in the film business in any capacity, I'm sure you're familiar with actors' auditions on so called self tapes. But did you ever understand how this whole concept started in the first place, how it gained a foothold, and why in the world do we call them self tapes when in this day and age there is no tape involved whatsoever, just digital files? Well, if you are wondering about any of those things, you're in the right place here. I'm Tommy G. Kendrick, and let's talk about it today on Actors Talk. Are you familiar with a casting director named Mark Fincannon? If you aren't, you should be. And I would call your attention to a podcast out of the Atlanta market by Jesse Malinowski called Get Seen Unscripted. And he had an episode with Mark Fincannon where they discussed the origins of self-taping in depth, and it's well worth your time to go and check that out. At about the 43 minute point, Mark starts talking about the origins of self-taping. Way back in, I think he said he first did it in 1988, but it really took hold in 2008 when he was casting a show called One Tree Hill. And the economy was in the dumps. Sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? Gas was, I think he said, $4.50 a gallon. And he could not get actors to drive from Atlanta to South Carolina to read for the show, especially for day player roles. But he still needed to cast the show. But check him out. He'll tell the whole story. I don't want to retell it here, but it's very, very interesting. And it talks about the origins of self-taping. Self-taping really took off in all the major markets after the pandemic. Now, those of us in regional markets, I'm in Texas. Mark Fincannon is based out of the Southeast. People in New Mexico, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Georgia, the Carolinas. We've been doing self-taping for years, well over a decade, as Mark explains in that episode that I called your attention to. But it wasn't until the pandemic hit that the actors in major markets were self-taping with regularity. And now it is the de facto manner in which actors audition for roles. No longer is it the case that we will go into a room and read with a casting director or for a director producer who can make the hiring decisions. We do all of our auditions, virtually all, at least in the film and television space, on video. We call them self-taping. It's a legacy name. As I say, there's no taping involved whatsoever and hasn't been for years. What's it all about? And what are the upsides and the downsides? So in case you don't know, let me just give you a little primer here really quickly for people who may not know what a self-tape is. I think I've already kind of described it. When actors get an audition, their agent notifies them they have an audition, probably these days through Actors Access, which is the major casting site for film and television. And they get their sides. Sides are a few pages of the script that the actor is sent with which to audition for the role. The actor then puts themselves on video through a home studio situation, or they may go pay someone to put them on video. They upload that video to the casting site. That casting director looks at the video, picks a certain number of selections from the many, many, many that they get for that one role, and then they send a few on to producers and directors. All right, let's break this down a little bit further. Basically, there are two types of auditions. There's the pre-read, and then there is the so-called producer read or director read. So in the old days, when we would go into the room, if the casting director wasn't familiar with an actor, they would bring them in for a pre-read, which meant the actor came into the office and read with the casting director or the casting director's associate while the casting director watched. So the caster would decide, yeah, I think this actor is really right for the role. I'm convinced that the actor has enough experience. They're not going to embarrass me, the casting director, if they come into the room and read for the producer and our director. They won't be too nervous, etc., etc., etc. They will present a professional performance. That's a pre-read. The other thing is the director-producer read. Now, once actors get to a certain level of experience, training, perhaps have name value, They come in if they audition at all. People who years ago didn't have to audition, they were just booked without auditioning. Now they go on what's called director or producer reads. So they would come into the room and read for the decision maker, the money, as my friend in California calls it. They would read for someone who can actually make a hiring decision, which the casting director cannot do. And they will tell you that too. That's not a slight toward casting directors, that's just not their function. So those are the two types of auditions. So what are the benefits of self-tape auditions? Well, self-tape auditions are here now, largely because of the pandemic. They're here en masse because of the pandemic. And the benefits to the actor are many, actually. We, the actor, are in control of our audition. We decide which take we send to casting. If we do one take, two takes, or 22 takes, we decide which one we upload to casting. So we're in control of what the casting director sees. Unlike in the days when we would go into the room, whatever we did in the room, that's the audition, and we had to live with that. And that's great. There's a lot of great things about being in the room, the social aspects of it, the networking, the building a relationship with casting directors, getting redirects, having the casting director say, hey, I've seen a lot of these auditions and everybody's doing this exactly the same. I think if you want to try something a little different, here's an idea, and get a redirect from the caster. Or if you're in a producer director session, they almost certainly would give you a redirect, if nothing else, just to see if you can take direction. So one of the benefits of being in the room is that you get a redirect. One of the negatives of being on self-tape is that you don't. You're the director. You have to decide what's the best approach. You do your best idea of what you bring to the table on that audition, and you have no one direct you. So you can't have someone, generally, unless you have a good actor on the other side of the camera reading with you that you're willing to take advice from, who can say, hey, blah, 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 maybe try this way next time. It might be a little more interesting or something. The casting director doesn't know if it's your first, second, or 31st or 32nd take on what you send them in the audition. So that's a benefit for the actor. We control what the caster sees. Another benefit is that self-taping has opened up casting basically worldwide. Before the advent of self-taping, I had an agent here for many years and still do, Collier Talent in Texas, but I didn't have one in any other market because you had to be able to go into the room for the audition. Once self-taping became a real big deal, then I was able to secure a representation in Atlanta through my agent there, Carol Shaganaw, and I've done in the recent past 2 films through Carol in my Atlanta agency. I just worked in Kentucky on a film called Carolina Caroline. Before that, I did a film with John Travolta and Stephen Dorff in Atlanta called Mobland. It's streaming. Hey, go check that out. I need the residual money. Also did a film here in Austin before I went to Kentucky called The End of Nowhere, and that was cast off of self-tape, as is everything now. But self-taping has really opened up the audition space so that actors are not limited to only auditioning in their home market. That's a real benefit, and one that I would never want to give up again. Okay, so what are the downsides? Well, my buddy in California, a terrific actor, you'd know him in a heartbeat, so I won't mention his name because he doesn't want me to, but he has very strong negative feelings about self-taping. He went into the room, read for the producer and director, and either booked the job or didn't, but he didn't have to worry about setting up a camera and lights and sound and all that, which he doesn't know much about and doesn't really want to know that much about and doesn't want to do. So that's one issue for him with self-taping. He doesn't want to go through the hoops that actors have to do to put a quality self-tape up to the casting office. The other thing is he views self-tapes as pre-reads. In his opinion, self-tapes have really made every audition a pre-read. Why does he say that? Well, for one thing, he's never sure that his audition gets to, as he says, the money, gets to the decision makers. We're never told if our auditions are passed on to producers and directors. If the casting office gets 50 auditions for a particular role, that's a lot of video to watch through, especially if they're 2, 3, 4 minutes, even if they're 1 minute. So how much of that audition is the caster looking at? Do they look at the first 5 seconds, 15 seconds, the whole thing? We don't know. But it's safe to say is if they make a pretty quick judgment that that actor or actress is not right for the role for whatever reason they determine, then they do not send that video on, and they probably do not even watch the entire audition. They make decisions really fast. Anecdotal information from online forums and things like that tells us that casting often makes decisions in the first 10 or 15 seconds. You might get 30 seconds or more if you're really enticing and they think you have something that's interesting for the project. But otherwise, they're so under the gun with watching so many video auditions that they don't have time to watch them all. So that's really a negative. And the negative is that we don't know. We never hear. We never hear on auditions anyway, even if they were in person. If we didn't book the job, you don't get a call saying, well, it was a great audition, but sorry you didn't book the job. You just never hear. You know you did a great job and that someone who's able to make a casting decision saw it if you book this job. Otherwise, you just never know. So my buddy says, I don't like it. I want to know that my audition was put in front of people who can make a hiring decision. He even thinks that SAG-AFTRA should be working on a contract provision that requires casting offices to inform actors who are passed on to the decision makers of that fact. What do you think about that? Should casting have to inform actors that are passed on to the decision makers that that has happened? Should they give notification to those actors' agents so that the actor knows, okay, I'm in a position to get hired. If I didn't, okay, so be it, but at least I know my work did get seen. Now, casting directors will tell you, and it makes common sense, that casting directors are not going to just not watch videos if they've requested auditions from people. They will watch at least some of it to find out what that actor brings to the table. Now, they may not watch the audition if the actor is late getting the audition in, late being right at the deadline or near the deadline, because they may have already selected the, let's say, 5 actors that they're sending on to the decision makers. So that's a reason to get your audition in as early as possible if you can. So those are some things about self-taping. Let me know what your thoughts are on self-taping. Are you for, or are you against? What do you think? Should we be going back into the room? Would you rather self-taping went away and that everything went back to in-person auditions, or what? What do you think? Let's talk about it and let me know in the comments. Please like this video so that more people can find it on YouTube. And let's have a conversation about, in this case, self-taping. God bless you. Tommy G. Kendrick, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.